There is a millennial individual scrolling through their phone on a Sunday evening, and something arrives in the feed that produces a feeling they have learned not to examine too closely. A former classmate has bought a house. The photograph is warm and sunlit, a key in a door, a caption about new chapters and gratitude. The millennial individual registers this information, and something in the vicinity of their chest performs a small, quiet calculation. They have rent. The former classmate has a mortgage. The former classmate is ahead. This is the logic of the feeling. It sounds stated plainly, slightly absurd, because the millennial individual knows, in the part of their mind that handles reasoning, that a mortgage is debt, that property is complicated, that the former classmate's finances are not visible in a photograph of a key. They know the calculation is irrational. The knowledge does not stop the calculation. The calculation runs on a different system than the reasoning, and the two systems do not communicate easily. And by the time the reasoning has finished making its case, the feeling has already recorded its verdict and moved on to the next post. This is the specific architecture of feeling behind without being behind, and it is running in the millennial individual's life with a consistency and an efficiency that would be impressive if it were not so exhausting. To understand how this pattern was installed, it helps to look at the specific conditions under which the millennial individual's sense of a normal trajectory was formed. The millennial individual grew up with a reasonably legible life script. The script had a sequence: education, then employment, then partnership, then property, then children, with each stage arriving within a culturally understood range of acceptable timing. The script was not written by anyone in particular. It was transmitted through the observable lives of the generation before them, through the expectations of parents who had followed a version of the same sequence, through the cultural infrastructure of a society in which the milestones were visible, recognizable, and assumed. The millennial individual had no particular reason to doubt the script. They were good students in many cases, or they worked hard, or they made the choices that the script indicated were correct: the degree, the internship, the entry-level position, the careful building of the thing that was supposed to lead to the next thing. They did the reading, they showed up, they proceeded in the expected direction, and then approximately 2008 happened, and the script turned out to have been written for a different economy. The jobs that were supposed to follow the degree were not there, or were there in attenuated form. Contract, internships extended indefinitely, positions that required 3 years of experience for which no one would provide the 3 years. The property that was supposed to follow the employment was priced at levels that the employment, when it finally arrived, could not support. The partnership, the children, the orderly progression through the stages, all of it got pushed. Delayed, renegotiated, or abandoned under economic conditions that the script had not accounted for. There's also a data point worth naming directly. Studies on millennial life circumstances consistently show that the picture is more complicated than behind suggests. Millennial educational attainment is the highest of any generation in American history. Homeownership, while delayed, has risen steadily. The genuine structural disadvantages, housing costs, student debt, wage stagnation relative to asset prices, are real and documented, but they are specific disadvantages in specific domains, not the comprehensive inadequacy that the Sunday evening feeling implies. The feeling is not measuring the data. It is measuring the script, and the script was written before the data existed. The script was wrong. The millennial individual was not wrong for following it. They were wrong for believing it would still work in the conditions they had actually been handed, which is not the same kind of wrong at all. But here is the specific cruelty of the situation, and the part that produces the Sunday evening feeling most reliably. The script did not disappear when it stopped working. The cultural expectations it encoded, the sense of what should have happened by now, the understood sequence of milestones and their approximate timing, those expectations were installed in the millennial individual's sense of normal before the economy revealed itself to be uncooperative. The installation happened during childhood and early adolescence, when the observable lives of the adults around them were running the script successfully enough that the script appeared to be simply how things went. The millennial individual absorbed it as fact rather than as contingency. It became the standard against which their own progress would later be measured. And then the economy changed, and the standard did not. This is why the millennial individual, who is, by any accurate accounting of the data, doing remarkably well given the conditions of their entry into adult life, continues to feel behind. The feeling is not measuring their actual performance against their actual circumstances. It is measuring their actual performance against a standard built for circumstances that no longer exist. And it is doing so with a persistence and a freedom from logical argument that makes it very difficult to address through the rational reassurance that things are actually fine. Social media is the mechanism that keeps the script running as an active, daily presence rather than a historical artifact, and this is worth understanding precisely. The millennial individual's sense of how their peers are doing is not gathered, as it was for previous generations, from the occasional encounter, the overheard conversation, the Christmas card update. It is gathered continuously, in every idle moment, from a stream of carefully selected and favorably edited presentations of other people's milestone achievements. The house photograph, the promotion announcements, the engagement rings and baby announcements, announcements and European holidays and corner offices and before and after home renovation project. None of these presentations is false, exactly. The house is real. The promotion happened. But each one is a selection, a single favorable moment, edited and captioned and posted at the moment when it produces the most positive social response. The full picture, which includes the stress of the mortgage, the 60-hour weeks that preceded the promotion, the relationship strain of the renovation, the credit card debt of the holiday, that picture is not in the feed. It is never in the feed. Nobody posts the full picture. The millennial individual scrolling through the feed is not comparing their full life to other people's full lives. They are comparing their full life, which includes its difficulties, its compromises, its ordinary Tuesday mornings, to a stream of other people's best moments. The comparison is structurally rigged. It cannot produce any other conclusion than behind. This is not a new observation. The millennial individual has probably heard some version of it before. They have probably nodded at it and thought, yes, I know social media is highlight reel. That is true. And then they have put the phone down and picked it up 15 minutes later, and the feeling has arrived again anyway. Because understanding a mechanism and being immune to it are different things, and the mechanism operates faster than the understanding. There is a particular trap that the millennial individual falls into when they attempt to address the behind feeling through achievement. And it is worth describing because it is extremely common and produces an almost perfectly circular outcome. The trap works like this. The millennial individual feels behind. They respond by doing more, working harder, earning more, acquiring more, progressing faster. They produce achievements. The achievements produce a brief reduction in the feeling, followed by a return of the feeling at the same level, because the feed has continued in the interim and has produced new comparison points that the new achievements have not yet matched. The millennial individual does more. The feeling returns. The cycle continues. This is the treadmill version of the problem, and it is the reason that acquiring the house, getting the promotion, hitting the milestone does not resolve the behind feeling in any durable way. The milestones were supposed to signal arrival, but the feed keeps moving, and arrival is never the final state of the comparison, only the starting position for the next one. The millennial individual who gets the house discovers that some of their peers have second properties, or are renovating more extensively, or have bought in a more desirable neighborhood. The standard is not fixed. It advances with every scroll. The alternative to the treadmill is not the abandonment of achievement, and it is not a resolution to simply be content, which is the kind of advice that sounds fine in the abstract and dissolves on contact with an actual Sunday evening. It is something more specific and more difficult, which involves the slow revision of the standard itself. The standard the millennial individual is running against is not theirs. It was given to them without their consent by an economy and a culture that have since changed the terms of the agreement without updating the metric. The behind they feel is the gap between what they have and what the old script said they should have by now. It is a gap created by the script's obsolescence, not by the millennial individual's insufficiency. This distinction sounds simple and is genuinely hard to make operative. The nervous system does not easily adopt new comparisons. The old standard is deeply encoded, reinforced by years of cultural messaging and every post in the feed, and revision is not accomplished by deciding to feel differently. It is accomplished slowly and unevenly, through the repeated practice of noticing when the comparison is running, noticing what it is using as its standard, and asking whether that standard is one the millennial individual has actually chosen, or one that was installed before. They were old enough to evaluate it. There's also something worth saying about the specific cohort the millennial individual is comparing themselves against, because the comparison is almost never accurate even as a description of the peers it claims to be measuring. The former classmate with the house is not uniformly ahead. They may be ahead in the specific domain of homeownership for any number of reasons that are not visible in the photograph: inheritance, dual income, lower cost of living, different risk tolerance, parental support, a different sequence of life choices whose costs are also not in the feed. In the domains that the photograph does not show, they may be behind in ways that are equally significant. They may be in a difficult relationship or dissatisfied in their work, or carrying anxieties that they have edited out of their public presence for the same reasons the millennial individual edits out their own. The comparison is between the millennial individual's full interior life and one carefully curated exterior moment of another person's life, and it is producing an assessment of relative progress that has no meaningful relationship to the actual comparative circumstances of two actual people. The millennial individual knows this. The knowledge arrives too slowly to interrupt the feeling. The millennial individual scrolling through the feed on a Sunday evening is not behind. They are running a comparison on a standard built for conditions that no longer exist, using data that has been curated to produce exactly the conclusion the comparison is reaching, in a system that was specifically engineered to keep them scrolling, because scrolling is what keeps the system running. The behind is real as a feeling. It is not accurate as an assessment, treating those two facts simultaneously. Taking the feeling seriously without endorsing its conclusions is the specific and unglamorous work available to the millennial individual for whom the Sunday evening calculation has become a chronic condition, rather than an occasional discomfort. The key in the photograph is real. The chapter the caption describes is probably genuinely new, and the person holding the phone, watching the photograph load in the feed, is not inadequate for not having the same chapter at the same time. They are simply someone who received the script and then received the economy, and has been doing the work of figuring out what counts as progress in the gap between the two. That work is not visible on a feed. It rarely is, but it is happening. Thanks for watching. If this felt familiar, leave a comment. And the next time the feeling arrives on a Sunday evening, consider asking what standard it is running against, and whether you chose that standard or whether it was given to you before you were old enough to know the difference.